Great. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the open house information session for the PhD in Historic Preservation. I'm very pleased to see you all here. Thank you so much for joining. I'm joined by Sarah Conikeo from the admissions office and Sarah Grace Godwin, who appears here as GSAP Historic Preservation Program. There
Hi,
she
everyone.
is. So welcome everyone. We're delighted to have you here. We have a presentation for you, and then we're going to answer some questions. So I'm going to straight away jump into that presentation in the interest of time. I will be sharing my screen over here. So let me do that real quick. Well, so here we are. This is the Columbia campus. Many of you will know the campus. The blue arrow points to Avery Hall, which is let's say, the headquarters, the head house of of GSAP, of the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. Those windows, those arched windows at the bottom, are Avery Library, which extends multiple floors down from this image, and is one of the premier architectural and preservation and art history libraries in the world. So we're very fortunate to have that right at our door. The school stretches over a number of different buildings, and we'll cover that in a second. The PhD program in preservation is housed in the Preservation Technology Lab. So we expect all applicants to engage in some degree with technology. We define technology very broadly, and of course, always to include questions of society, of culture, of memory, of politics, of materiality, of art. So we are really looking for your ideas of how you are thinking about defining preservation technology. There is a lot of work, of course, that you will be doing in researching, and you will be learning how to become a research scholar. And we will be spending a lot of time in and out of Avery Library, of course. Just next to the Preservation Technology Lab is the Natural Materials Lab, with which we collaborate. The Natural Materials Lab is, as the name suggests, interested in natural materials. Many of these materials have vernacular origins. So they come from vernacular architecture, like earthen materials. And so many PhD students are interested in collaborations across between the Preservation Technology Lab and the Natural Materials Lab. And of course, Lola Benalon, who directs the Natural Materials Lab, is actually also on the PhD committee. So let's talk very quickly about the position for fall 2026. As you all might know, we have one PhD position. Now, it is a 5-year position. It involves the first year, 2 years of coursework. The first year is just coursework. The second year is coursework and teaching. On the third year, you'll be doing the qualifying exams, your dissertation proposal, and also some teaching. The fourth year is really reserved for dissertation work, research, your projects, writing, and then in year 5, you're finishing up your dissertation and writing and defending it. What the doctoral package offers is full tuition. You also get an annual stipend. You get a summer stipend. You get health insurance, and you get 75% of dental insurance. So you can think of this as a job for 5 years, but the job here really entails producing new knowledge about historic preservation under the advisement of our faculty. Now, every year we put out a call, and every year is a little bit different, because we're interested in advancing different areas of knowledge in historic preservation. And so this year, the call, which you might or might not have seen, is here. We're looking for a candidate who should have an interest in interrogating public policies and governance related to place-based heritage and the existing built environment, to develop doctoral research addressing the future of the heritage enterprise as an agent of social and environmental change. The ideal candidate for this program should have a background in preservation or heritage studies, proficiency in academic writing and conducting social science research, and a solid understanding of how to integrate historical evidence with a critical perspective on preservation and public policy. A deep focus on critically analyzing heritage theory and its policy manifestations in relation to social justice and climate action is highly desirable, as is an orientation towards understanding the systemic implications of preservation across publics and geographies. The candidate's proposed preservation research topic may take a number of directions related to heritage policy, such as community engagement and the co-production of knowledge, the decarbonization of the existing built environment, the procedural and distributive justice implications of climate adaptation, land use, and housing development, or others. Now, our faculty that will be advising your research include myself, Erica Avrami, who is an expert in preservation policy and whom you would most likely, given the nature of the call, be engaged with. Lola Benalon, who directs the Natural Materials Lab. Mabel Wilson, who is the Nancy and George Rupp Professor at GSAP in African American and African Diaspora Studies. And she's also the director of the Institute for Research in African American Studies. Lucia Ley, who is an architectural historian, and she is also director of the Buell Center for American Architecture. And she's also co-director of a project with Forrest Meggers called the Concrete 100. I invite you all to look more closely at all the biographies of the faculty. They're all posted on the GSAP website. There are a number of other PhD faculty at GSAP and Columbia that could be potential people that you might take classes with or have as part of your dissertation committee. And I'm listing them here both at GSAP. They are in the planning PhD. They are in the architectural history PhD. Also around Columbia at Barnard College, Aaron Passell and Anuradha Iyer Siddiqui both work on questions of preservation. And in the Department of Art and Archaeology, you have Barry Bergdahl and Zeynep Chalik Alexander, who also deal with questions of preservation. So again, I invite you all to look at these professors as you prepare your application. Now, within the preservation program, we have a very robust preservation faculty, many of whom teach in the master's program, and part of your PhD might entail taking some master's levels classes as well in areas that perhaps you're trying to, increase your knowledge. They are both architects like Paul Bentel, Françoise Bolak, Mark Rakatansky. They're artists like Krzysztof Wojcicko or myself. There are engineers like Norman Weiss, John Walsh. There are conservators like Amanda Trienens, Richard Piper. They are planners like Carol Clark, Shreya Ghoshal. The gamut of different disciplines that really constitute all of the different facets of what preservation practice and preservation discourse really is. Of course, I also want to emphasize that in terms of preservation technology, civil engineers like Tim Michels, geologists and conservators like Richard Piper, or Amanda Trienens, and also information technology experts working on artificial intelligence like Kivanch Kose or Bilge Kose, Andre Jauregui also working on digital 3D scanning, Haley Ramos as well. All of these might bear on your proposals and your thinking in relationship to this year's call. Now, you should be aware also of the different research centers and institute at Columbia University because your research might engage with some of them. And we do want to hear from you if you are interested in conducting research in relationship to these centers and institutes. So we put up this slide here so you get a good sense of some of the potential laboratories or institutes that you might be that you should look into as part of your research into our program. Now, just to give you a sense of what current students and recent graduates have worked on, again, every year our call is very different, always dealing with preservation technology, but in different ways. So Shuyi Yin, who just graduated, wrote a dissertation on a history of 3D digitization technology and its global networks in architectural heritage preservation. She went all the way back to the 19th century to look at how optics, plane photography, plane tables for taking measurements off of photographs, began the whole idea of digitization, and then how different technologies that were introduced in the course of the 20th century began to shape how we think of heritage and also help us gain a new understanding of those very technologies within heritage. So fantastic dissertation. Also, Anna Gasha recently completed her PhD on transnational exchanges of technoscientific knowledge in addressing natural hazards, disaster risk, and vulnerability in built heritage. She was very interested in the ways that, for example, technologies that were local and vernacular in terms of building with earth were demoted by international experts in order to introduce new retrofitting civil engineering technologies. She comes from a civil engineering background and history background, so she brought a lot to this topic. Robert Louis Brandon Edwards is looking at the preservation of the Black cultural experience of segregated travel during the Great Migration in the United States. And his argument is that that experience involved moving through various architectural and non-architectural spaces, including buses, but that preservation really is not able to capture or deal with those spaces that are not typical architecture and site in their form, such as buses. So his whole dissertation is how do we, this is a lack in preservation knowledge, how do we deal with vehicles? How do we integrate them within preservation discourse? How do we help to protect them? So he actually purchased this 1947 Greyhound bus designed by Raymond Loewy and is currently working on the bus physically to experiment on how one could begin to preserve it, and then through the physical preservation also begin to unpack policy issues and questions of larger structural questions of how do we think about preservation. Deka Hussein Wetzel is interested in digital media. She is currently in her third year, as I recall. Hussein is comes from a background of podcasting and using media broadcasting technology. So she's interested in how that can be deployed to think differently about the preservation of cultural memory in urban environments. Xin Gao is working her research on earthen architecture preservation and materials conservation science, really thinking about new recipes, new ways of preserving earthen architecture, which has a very important set of issues that are both technical, cultural, and theoretical to advance. Cayetano Ferrer just started the PhD program. He is an artist. He works with fragments of buildings that are demolished and tries to think about how they can play a role in the preservation discipline and practice. So that gives you a sense of the cohort with whom you will be in classes and with whom you will be in the program. So now let me turn very quickly to the application process to give you a sense of how the requirements for that. So the qualifications to apply to the PhD program is that you must hold a master's in historic preservation, or you must have relevant experience in preservation and a master's in a related field. So your master's could be in architecture, art, engineering, or planning. Okay. Now, the deadline is January 8th, and you need to have transcripts for all of your post-secondary education, a statement of academic purpose, about which I'll say a little bit more in a second, a curriculum vitae, 3 letters of recommendations from academic sources. So typically professors who themselves have a PhD, who have advised you and can write about your ability to conduct independent scholarly research. GRE scores, you may submit them, but they are waived for the 2026 admission cycle. For international students, we require an English proficiency test. And we would like to see a sample of your scholarly writing of a maximum of 30 pages. You may submit things you haven't published. You may submit things you have published. We can talk about that more in the Q&A session. And then reviews of the admissions begin in January, and you will hear decisions about admission or wait list in early March. Now, some tips for a successful application. So one of the most important parts of your application is going to be your statement of research interest. Remember that the PhD in historic preservation is individual research. You are driving the research. You are here to conduct research on a topic that interests you, and you are obviously being advised by one of the faculty and a committee of faculty here in the preservation program. So it is very important that you tell us about what you're interested in, but that you begin by describing your understanding of the current knowledge in preservation discourse, policy, and practice. In other words, we want to know how you see preservation. What are the key ideas in preservation that interest you and why? What are the key projects that interest you and why? Who are the key figures in preservation that interest you and why? And of course, we don't want you to just mention their names. We want you to tell us how you read their work. You might mention some essay they wrote. You might mention some book they wrote. You might mention some project they did. So that's what you should begin with, is giving us a kind of, how do you see the discipline? And then you should turn to telling us about what do you see as missing from the discipline today? Given all of your interests, what knowledge currently hasn't been really unpacked, dealt with properly in preservation discourse, policy, and practice. So once you've identified that gap in knowledge, we want you to tell us, what are your qualifications for undertaking this research? What have you done so far? What training do you have? What projects and experience do you have that really situate you in a good place to be the person to undertake this research that you understand is urgently needed? And then tell us how you plan to do this research at Columbia. What can Columbia do for you and your research? What about the Preservation Technology Lab? What do you hope to, what is your approach to preservation technology? How do you see your research engaging with questions of preservation technology. If you're more policy oriented, it might be questions, for example, of GIS, or, part of the call deals with decarbonization. How are you going to be using the different software tools and different technologies for measuring or quantifying or qualifying decarbonization? So how do you plan to do the physical experimentation applied to existing buildings, materials, or to policy networks? There's one thing is to work on a specific building. The other is to work more structurally and systemically across the whole of preservation policy and law. And the latter is more the focus of this year's call. So tell us how you plan to do practical research on this subject. How are you going to engage with Avery Library? What kind of theoretical and historical research do you plan to do? And how do you plan to engage with other research facilities at Columbia? And then tell us a little bit about 2 or 3 members of the preservation PhD faculty that you feel you would like to work with that might offer something of their knowledge to your research project. So then once you've done your application statement of interest, you want to identify 3 recommenders that can write you a very strong letter. And so you will want to find PhD faculty that have PhD degrees who have either helped you with research or that have been there with you along the way at some point in your academic career that can actually speak to that. You may also get letters from employers, but it's best to have academics because they understand a little bit better what a PhD entails. But if you have an employer who also has a PhD and who can speak to your research abilities, that's also okay. You'll need to submit a writing sample. So make sure that this writing sample is one that engages with preservation questions. Don't send us a writing sample that is completely unrelated to preservation. Try to make sure that it really helps to round out the image of you as a preservation thinker, as a preservation scholar, as a preservation practitioner. These don't need to be published, but it's a plus. Maximum is 30 pages, so it might be that you submit 2 essays that are 15 pages each, or 3 essays that are 10 pages each. That's okay, but no more than 30 pages. And optional is to send us a portfolio. We like to see if you've been in practice, the kind of work that you've been doing, how you've conducted applied research experiments, how you apply technologies in the field, how you think in terms of aesthetics, design, art, how you express concepts visually. Very important for us. So in all cases, especially since preservation is always a group project, identify your role in that group project in the portfolio. Okay, so required classes is the first is the PhD colloquium. You'll be taking that your first and second year. You'll be taking one of those, and then you will be taking also within the school 2 doctoral colloquiums, one in architecture or in planning. You'll be taking different electives within GSAP. You can also take elective courses within the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. You may take some courses outside of GSAP and GSAS, and there is a consortium of universities in the New York area that you can take classes in as well, if the class is really important to you and it is not offered at Columbia. So Now, you have to be in residence here at Columbia for at least 3 subsequent years of the total 5. You have to complete an MPhil exam, which is during your 3rd year. You will have to complete language exams. You'll have to have one language other than English. And you will have at the completion of that dissertation above requirements, you'll receive an MPhil and be advanced to candidacy to the PhD. And at that point, you're expected to complete your dissertation in 2 years, but no more than 4 years. Okay. All right. Now, at Columbia is a very special place. We do, it's a vibrant academic community, and we like to cultivate that. So we're going to encourage you to attend conferences. We're going to organize conferences and have you contribute to the organization of conferences. So here, the Fitch Colloquium is an international conference that happens every year at Columbia, where we bring some of the leading preservation scholars around the world. We organize mostly bi-weekly preservation lectures over lunch, where we all get together and engage with different leaders in the field. And also we publish a scholarly journal, Future Anterior, that we encourage you to become involved with as managing editor or guest editor of an issue as you move through the program.